We're live. It's after 7. It's like 7:15. I got a little bit late because I had an excellent date night with my lovely wife, Lisa, who said she might be posting later on. So that will be cool. I just posted a video today. If you guys can take a look, I have the video up. I got some shiny on my nose. What's going on here? We compared the 347, which is a 302 base stroker, to a 351 Windsor. So what I want to know from you guys when you finally arrive here is which one would you like better? Do you think that the 347 is the way to go, like a stroker 302 base motor, or is the 351 Windsor? And personally, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, I really, really like the 351 Windsor, especially after we did the big bang on it. It's got lots of power potential. I don't think we could get anywhere near that kind of power level on a stock 302 block, whether it's a 302 or a 331 or a 347. I just don't think it has the power potential to make the power that a 351 Windsor does. So for me, I think I would choose that. Plus, it gives you the ability to do 383, 392, 408 kind of thing. So you know, bigger obviously is always better. So it can make more power. So that's why I would pick that one. We've run lots and lots and lots and lots and a whole bunch of lots of 347s because that seems to be the way that most people go. A 302 works good. And the only thing better than that is a 325 or a 331 or even a 347. Lots of guys don't like them because they say that they side loaded and don't last and all of that stuff. But I was kind of more interested in comparing the different kinds of displacements. We had the short deck 302 base motor and then the taller deck 351. And so guys brought up a lot of things like, oh, what about the bearing size and the rod or the main journals and all that stuff? And I'm like, look, you're focusing on the wrong thing. Basically, the big thing is displacement. So if the displacements are similar, and then you start looking at the other things, is the compression similar, is the camshaft, the cylinder heads, yada, yada, yada. If all of that stuff is similar, they're going to make similar power because the big thing, as I said, is displacement. And then when you do the other things and they're comparable, I know we didn't use the exact same components, and I'm hoping that guys, at least one guy, and I'm hoping 10, made the apples the oranges comparison because they always do that, and I love that, like we're all fruit growers or whatever, but it's super cool. For me, especially, again, like as I said, after doing the big bang 351, it's hard for me to say 351 Windsor with the twin turbos. I think that it's awesome. I don't think we could get the 1,000 horsepower stuff with the 5-liter, but let me know if you guys think that we can on a 5-liter short block. I know that we've done other stuff on the drag strip and with the guys at HP Performance. And when we were doing turbos with them, stuff in the neighborhood of 750 to 800 foot-pounds of torque when they were out drag racing thing seemed to want to split the block. But let me know what you guys think. That's why we're here. But if you have not taken a look, make sure to go take a look. And right now I'm working on 2 interesting videos. One of them is the myth of dynamic compression. And that actually should get a lot of viewers. It should get a lot of comments. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what dynamic compression is compared to static compression, and then what dynamic compression is not. Because I get a lot of people that when they find out about one thing, like if they find out about cross-sectional area or coefficient of discharge, or in this case, or rod ratio, or in this case, dynamic compression, they think that that's the only thing. That's the only thing that matters. That's going to determine how much octane we can run or how much power we can make. And it determines the camshaft, and it determines a lot of things. And what they don't realize is, and what the focus of that video will be, and you guys, Lisa's in the house. Yay, Lisa. What you guys will get to realize is that the dynamic compression, like everything else, can be useful, but it's you know, it's the difference between it being causal and it being correlated. Like, it's not the only thing. There are lots of other things that are going to determine how much power your motor is going to make. Lots of other things that are going to determine how much octane you have to run, what the detonation threshold is, all of those things. That is one of the indicators. But for a lot of guys, that's like the holy grail of all of the things. As soon as they learned about this, they're like, oh yeah, that determines everything. And as we'll see, it doesn't determine everything any more than anything else determines everything. Too many. Oh, that's why I can't talk. That's what you're saying. Too many drinks. I say not enough. Okay, let's see. 351 for sure. Beefier, more displacement. Yes, I like that. 347 would be good. Yeah, that 347 actually belonged to the guys at Hot Rod Magazine. It's a test that I did for them, and we ran a couple of different trick flow heads on it with that camshaft. And I didn't take that full. That thing actually worked fairly well. Boss 302 stroke to 342. That would be good. Yeah, and that's the other thing is if you look at what we would have spent had we bought all of that stuff, starting with a junkyard 351 is a lot cheaper. The thing that I don't like about us starting with a junkyard 351 is that EFI motor has a really big dish piston. Like it would have been cool if that was a flat top piston or a flat top piston that had valve release, but you're probably only going to get that from the aftermarket. Is this what date night has come to? My wife is just like 17 different kinds of awesome. David says, hi, Richard Michael. I had a 74 Pantera. It had a 351 Cleveland. We had the car up to 145 on the way to his house. I used to babysit for him on the condition that he picked me up in the Pantera. See, that's a good rule. I like that. Excuse me. Tim wants to know what's the consensus on what a 94 roller 351 Windsor can handle. The stock bottom end so far has gone well over 1,000 horsepower, so we think that there's maybe more. A modernized 265, probably not high on the list. Everyone say hi to Lisa. What's up with my fellow gearheads from SoCal? Who's the genius giving the thumbs down? Like, does it say who gives the thumbs down? So like, I can call them out and contact them and find out like what their issue is. Why don't they like some of this stuff? Scuba Sam. Yeah, that's why. Dynamic compression is why you should have big compression with big cams. That's the best combination. Does running aluminum heads keep your combustion temperature lower? Yes, it does. But does an aluminum head make more power than an iron head? And they've tried at Engine Masters, I know, time and time again to find a way to actually test that. But the problem is having an exact duplicate of an iron head versus an aluminum head. I know that manufacturers make iron heads and aluminum versions, but what they found out when they were doing it, what Brule and Freiberger and those guys found out, is even though that they say that they're the same head, they're actually not. They're different, and the chamber is different, and the port is different, and lots of things are different about them. The compression on the 347, I think, was a flat top piston, so I'm thinking it's close to 10-1. It was a lot higher than the 351 was. Hello from 9 Mile, WA. I'm assuming that that's Washington. Hello from my friends up north. The price difference would be different between those two. The 347 would certainly be more money. Yes, everyone say hi to the lovely Lisa. We had a wonderful happy hour date night. It was awesome. A Packard V8. Yeah, I've never run one of those. Or a straight 8 would also be awesome, but I've never run one of those. One of the things I was looking at while I went down the Pontiac rabbit hole is the 4-cylinder Pontiac. Now, I knew about the Sprint motor, but I didn't know about the 4-cylinder version that they made. So that would be hard to find, and it would definitely be like other guys' stuff. A 430, yes, that would be interesting. 430 Ford would be cool. Yeah, Packards were a straight 8. That's why I mentioned that. Thomas wants to know, so along the same lines of this test, 427 small block Chevy versus 427 LS. I think, for me, I think it's really hard for the small block Chevy to beat an LS. The LS has the advantage going in if you look at what the stock power outputs are, and you look at the advantage that a small block Chevy has. I would like to see somebody do that and find out what the difference really is if you put really good heads. I know that when we put together a typical, like I put together 383 LS motors, and they make somewhere between 540 horsepower and 600 horsepower. And I just haven't had a lot of 383 small block Chevys get up to 600. And I know that they can, because I know that there's guys that are capable of doing that. I just think that the LS stuff makes more power than the small block Chevy does. The early Ford, David says that the early Ford EFI gave a lot of problems. Would it be better to just carb and HEI distribute those engines? If you're talking about like a 5-liter Mustang, we made lots and lots of power with the factory electronics. So I didn't see that. I ran mine out at the Silver State wide open throttle for half an hour. So if something was going to happen that was based on the electronics, I don't think that that's a problem. 84 Crossfire cross ram intake with 2 double barrel carbs instead of the EFI on a 283 going at a gasser. No, that's definitely fun. That's not junk. The L83 intake manifold, unless you're doing oh no, you are doing 84 Corvette. So that's going to be an L83, and it probably will be much better. It will be more able to feed a 283 than it will be feed the 350. But I do want to do a test on those because I think that those are awesome. Flathead V8. Radon, I got a guy that's going to let me run some flathead 4-cylinder stuff, but not a V8. See, 3 SCTA records with a Buick straight 8. That's cool. I like that they do that. Those vintage classes where you can run those kinds of motors. What would a 331 do with all the 347 stuff on? It's going to just make less power. It's going to have less compression. It's going to have less displacement. So even if you just did it based on math, so if the 347 made a certain number of horsepower per cubic inch or per liter, however you want to divide it up, and then you reduce that, you took that number and then multiplied it by 331 or whatever the displacement of the 331 is, and you just multiply that out, it's going to make less power. Smaller motors make less power. They don't magically, oh, this one has a better rod ratio or this one has the short stroke, so it's going to want to rev, yada, yada, yada. It just makes less power. Sheridan, Wyoming, what's up? I have driven through Wyoming. It's pretty country. Any power advantage to a coil on plug setup on a 351 Windsor? I don't think so, given how much power we've made with distributors and single coils and some kind of ignition amplifier. You'd have to be up there pretty far, I think, to get coil on plug stuff. Yes, Aaron, we've heard about the RPM Act, if that's what you're talking about. Have you ever built up any foreign V6s? I haven't run them on the engine dyno. We've done some. I was back when the show shop guys were doing those. Those were Yamaha motors, so they were Ford, but they were built by Yamaha stuff. If you're talking about Nissans or Toyotas or Hondas, I want to do the Honda 3.2 or 3.5, the J series stuff on the engine dyno. That will be fun. Yeah, Pontiac had a V8 way back. The one that I'm running in 57 was their next generation. Tim wants me to do Y block Fords. I've never run one of those, like a 312 from a T-Bird or something. Pinedale, Wyoming. So you Wyoming guys should get together. Yeah, Joe, a 347 with a 4125 bore and a 325 stroke would be good. But what's better is make it a 3400 stroke and make it a 363. We've run lots of those, and those make really good power. We've run the Dart SHP blocks, and those things work very well. Matthew just put together a 331 Windsor Junior heads, 274 cam, and a V1S trim. Looking for any input advice or upgrading here. Take a look at the small block Chevy head test that we did. The Windsor Junior is not a great cylinder head. There are better choices, but a 331 with a decent head like an AFR or Trick Flow and that camshaft and a V1S trim can make a lot of power. Depending on what intake you're using also is going to determine kind of what's happening there at the top. How about building a high revving D-stroke 4.3 liter? Well, the 4.3 liter L99 is already a D-stroked motor. So it's a 3-inch stroke right now. It just has a small bore also. So it will rev, you know, more than enough. We just got to get the valve train right down. And what we're going to do is put that stuff in a 5.7 bore. So it'll be a 3-inch stroke and a 4-inch bore. It'll be a 302. So it'll be a Gen 2 DZ 302. And then we'll try to rev that thing up at least a little bit, maybe with a blower on it. Thomas, I don't know about the crate motors, whether or not a 427 versus a 427 crate motor is going to be an accurate depiction of what's going on, because a lot of that's going to depend on what components they chose. If you put stock 5.3 heads on there and put a stock camshaft in an LS, obviously on a 427, it's not going to make very much power. And the same thing with a small block Chevy. If you put fuely heads on it, it's just not going to make very much power. So it depends on what things you choose for that displacement. Dan, I haven't tested a 400 small block to failure. I don't know what the limit is on the 400. Jody, I've never messed with an industrial 352. Yeah, Bill, Spinal Tap spins at 11,000. It's got a long stroke on it. That's what I'm saying. That's what I keep telling people, is that it's not because he's been scienced out. He spent a lot of time on the Spintron with Billy over at Comp and stuff, and they've scienced out what's happening in the valve train. So they had to they had to work a lot, and he's got a really big camshaft in that thing. It's a lot of lift and it's a lot of duration. So they had to science that out. And the other thing you have to do is not just a camshaft to get to make power up there, but the ramp rates have to be right. And then the frequency has to be matched to the spring rate. So it's not just having lots of spring rate. That doesn't cure it. As a matter of fact, that can actually make it worse. So you have to match the camshaft to the RPM range you want to run with the frequency of the spring. And my guess is, and I haven't seen this, I've talked to Ben directly about this, but my guess is you're going to go through areas where the frequencies don't match. So you have instability at 8,000 or 8,500 that you don't have at 10 or 10.5 or 11,000 or however far they're going. A 400M you want to do a big bang on? There's not a lot of those. Well, if you look at my favorite 400, I don't really have a favorite. I like them all. I like what we did with the 400M. That was great. But a 400M is a completely different designed motor than like the 400 Pontiac, or it's kind of the same as David. It's kind of the same as a 400 Chevy. So it was used in a lot of heavy cars as an interim between a big block and a small block. And the same thing with the 400M. It was used kind of in place of the 460. But the 400 Pontiac was actually used as a performance motor. And so that thing was run with lots of cool stuff. You had, the ram air versions, and that thing was more of a performance motor. So I think ultimately that one would probably make more power until you started modifying them. And then they're all 400-inch motors. You put good heads on it, put big camshafts. David, what's up? #1 fan. Yeah, #1. Andrew, 499. You've done some videos for Speedmaster. What's your opinion on the 210 small block forward head as a budget head? I have that video up, I think, on the channel. I think I've run the Speedmaster heads. The ASCAS head and the CNC head are not, the forward heads anyway, the ones that we tested are not, they're not comparable to an Airflow Research or a Trick Flow head. So they're better than a stock head, but they're not anywhere near what those other heads will do. Are belt drive timing chain conversions for valve train harmonics or something else? Usually the belt drive, most of the guys like those because they're external and they're dry and they're also externally adjustable. So if a guy wants to adjust them, I don't know that a belt is going to have more or less stretch than the chain does. I'm thinking that it has less, but I don't know that a belt drive has the longevity. Like nobody I know ever runs 100,000 miles on a belt drive. David wants to know my thoughts on GT40P head. Take a look at the small block Ford video that's up on all of the cylinder heads. I tested the GT40P heads. They're below an aluminum GT40 aluminum head. They're above a stock head, so they work fairly well. Lots of guys have done stuff with porting those and milling those and made pretty decent power. Oh, a Nissan 5.6 versus a Toyota. Yeah, that would be good. That would be a good comparison. I just would have to figure out a way to run both of them. All right, Patrick, get to work, man. A vintage VW flat 4 with DPI. I've actually done some Volkswagen testing. I did some stories for Hot VWs back in the day where we did the bus heads and then we did the them staking the seats into the head so that they don't come out. And I also did some testing where we ran they were Weber fuel injection. They look like Weber carburetors with injectors inside of them. And we ran them on V8s, but we also ran them on Volkswagens. And the guy that we were talking to, the shop that we were working, this was interesting because he was the king of all things Volkswagen. And he was telling me how much that less power that these things were going to make than his super 48s, 52s, 58s, 60s, whatever size Weber he was talking about. And so he ran his stuff on his motor, and this was a motor that he had competed in an Engine Masters type thing for Volkswagen guys. But unfortunately, they had like a land and sea dyno that they kind of had to adjust manually. And I said, okay. I said, well, let's see what happens. And then we ran that, and he could never do a sweep like a traditional dyno does. They had to load it and adjust it and then stop and then load it and adjust it because they can't run the Volkswagen for very long because it's air cooled and it will heat up and burn itself to death. So what I did is that we ran this fuel injection in place of the Webers, and they made as much power as the Webers did. And I said, I'll tell you what, you guys did that competition, and you ran it from 2,500 to 6,500, and you guys were trying to find out the most average power. I said, I'll guarantee you that right now I can beat your score. And he said, okay, let's do it. And so I took the fuel injection that we had on there, and then I just started adding stack length. I just took pieces of tubing and taped the radius entry that we had that was on top of these Weber looking things, and then stuck the tube down in, and we taped those on. And as we started adding stack length, he was having to adjust the knob because it was making a lot more torque, because everybody with these Volkswagens runs these short runner manifolds with the biggest Weber that they can have on it. And then they run these giant openings in the upper part of the manifold, and then it necks down to a tiny little hole that's in the port of the head. And none of them, well, they work, but they don't work as well as when I added like 6 or 8 inches of stack length to the Volkswagen. He's like, whoa, what's going on? I said, well, we just added like 15 or 20 foot-pounds of torque, which is a lot. It was probably a 10% gain on that motor. And I said, so you should have had me, a guy that knows nothing about Volkswagens, this is the first time I've ever run one. You should have had me come with you to your test, and I would have been able to add you like 20 or 30 foot-pounds of torque. It'd have been much better. He's like, oh yeah, that works really good. How about comparing 185cc and CNC ports versus 195 as cast? That would be a good test. But I look at the test that I did on the 175, the 190, the 210, and the 225, and you can kind of get your answer there. David, I remember when you could rebuild the Volkswagen for $400. I also remember when guys used to go out to Glamis and throw the magnesium case transmissions in the fire, and then they burn so bright that you could actually see them from space. Stuart, he has a 5.4 Navigator with adapters to run the Coyote intake. The Coyote intakes are really good. Are you using the early Coyote? Are you using the late one? Are you using a Cobra Jet? It depends on which one you're using. I've tested the Canfield heads. The Canfield heads are up. Take a look at the video that I did on all the Ford heads. The Canfields are there. I don't know which ones they were, though. Yeah, Jody, those bugs are fast on the. I've seen a couple of turbo bugs that. The thing is that they 60 foot like there's nothing. I mean, they take off, they launch really hard, and so it's hard to run them down after they get 4 or 5 lengths on you on the dig. Yeah, right. He was really impressed with 15 to 20 foot-pounds of extra, and it gained it through the whole RPM range. Basically, we ended up trading a little bit at 6,500, but the average numbers were up so far that he would have just killed everybody in the test because nobody runs like runner length in those things. Jeff, the Godzilla motors are awesome. I like the stuff that Evan's doing or Brian's doing. They're making lots of power. It's a big motor, and if you get good flowing heads and camshaft and an intake manifold, it does good things. A Doug, a 455 O's with smog era heads. Porting will help those because there's not a lot there, but a set of Edelbrock heads will help even more. Yeah, Tim, they just didn't really understand that the port opening in the head's about this big, and then the opening that they wanted to put in the intake manifold, because you got to put a 60 millimeter or 58 millimeter Weber on there. I'm like, you guys have no idea. That one port in the Weber flows enough to feed all of the motor, and they just couldn't come to grips with that. Durham, that 202 torque cam can make lots and lots of power. So any camshaft that you put in there, that thing is going to be 30 or 40 above a stock cam, and we can make 700 with a stock cam. I'm sure that if we really, really pushed it, we could make 1,000 horsepower with that little 202 cam. So you're fine with what you're doing. Gerald, if all you want to make is 400 to 450 horsepower, any heads cam intake and a blower on a 302 is going to easily do that. Acceptable piston ring gap for a boosted LS. Not big power, but maybe 14. Do you know that you say that 14 pounds is not much power, but if you put 14 pounds on a 500 horsepower motor, that's 1,000 horsepower. So it can be a lot depending on what you're starting with. So 14 pounds can be a big, big number on a cammed LS. And Bat Dog, you do not need back pressure on a turbo. That's the last thing that you want. You want zero back pressure on there. You want as free flowing and exhaust as you can put after the turbo as you can. Don't listen to anybody that's telling you that you need back pressure. That's just dumb. ICT car guy 316. I don't know what an 873 head is. Do you mean an 823 head? Because I know what that is. Is an 873 an iron LS head? That might be, because I've only ever seen one set of those in the flesh. Durham, so you put 24 gap in, that should work. Right up until it doesn't. Actually, 24 probably get you a long ways. When I put 28 to 30 in it, that's probably overkill. Manual, if the back 2 cylinders are bad, did you also check leak down? See if you've got cross flow between the 2 cylinders, and that will tell you if you've blown a head gasket there or if you've broken both of the ring lands. Yeah, Tim, it's a stock 6 liters over 700 with 14 pounds. I know that we on the engine dyno, a stock 400 makes it, or stock 6 liter makes about 400. So it would be a pretty big number if you added 14 pounds of that, even just a stock one, especially if you had E85. I haven't done any muffler tests on at that power level, 800 to 1,000 horsepower. I haven't done that. That would be turbo stuff mostly, or blower stuff. I haven't run, Dan, I haven't run aftermarket knock sensors. We've tried a few systems, and when we've tried them, they always hear something, and they always hear something when there's not something there. We know because we run them on NA motors with enough octane, and they're still hearing something. So in my opinion, it takes a lot of effort to get the frequency matched on the knock sensor to actually hear detonation in the motor and not hear the other stuff. To give you an idea, the guys from Roush were commissioned to do the Lightning trucks. I think it was the Lightning trucks. It was one of the supercharged applications for Ford. And what they tried for a long time and what they eventually did was just turn them off. So that tells you how much effort it goes into actually making it hear the right thing that it wants to hear. And then once you do that, once you know what to listen to, and once your thing hears that, then having it, getting the parameters right. Okay, if you hear this, take this much timing away. And if you hear it again, take this much more. And if you hear it again, take all the timing away. Whatever those things are, whatever the countermeasures are, that part of it's easy. But getting it to actually hear the bad thing and then taking those countermeasures is always the hard part. Steve, you must be late to the party. We already went out for happy hour. Doug, the exhaust manifold should not go all the way through to the water jacket. Although I have drilled and tapped some on small block Fords that ended up doing exactly that, because I had to redo the pattern for the headers that we had on the trick flow heads. We had the offset pattern on that I had to put on the Ford, and I just drilled all the way through into water, and then we would bolt the bolt in there. It'd seep a little bit, but not bad. Joe, we've already done over 1,000 horsepower with a 351. That's not that hard. But a fluid dampener would have been good on the motor that we did it on, rather than stick welding the factory one. That was not good. But the rotating assembly was already balanced from the factory. That's why we get wrecking yard motors, because all of that stuff is already done. Gillis, I've not run E Street heads on a 351. We ran a bunch of them, and the test was done long ago, before a lot of this stuff was available. So we ran Performer and Performer RPM heads and Victor Jr. heads, because they had the 3-tiered approach back then. The Edelbrock did, and I haven't run the E Street stuff. Yes, Thomas, everyone's having a good night. The Performance Bible. I've written a few books. It's not very lucrative. Oh, way over 1,000, Joe. Okay. The stock bottom end's probably not going to get to 1,600 on a 351 Windsor, I don't think. Rhiannon, have you ever done any testing with the 5-liter with Victor Jr. heads? We've run Victor Jr. heads a lot, especially way back in the day. And keeping it real, I haven't run Toyota or Nissan V8s on the engine dyno, because we don't have a way to hook them up. Doug, what's up? What, Doug? No question? Come on. I can't guarantee that you'll get like a really good answer, but you'll get some kind of answer. Joe wants to try the non-HO cam firing order. So you think it's the cam firing order that's limiting the strength of the short block? All right, Doug, but you let me know if you guys come up with another one. We're good here. James is in the house. Durham wants some Summit 3.8 pistons and the 6300 Lanati rods. Simple mods, any major power gains on sequential versus batch? I've run that test before, and at wide open throttle, we don't see a lot. I was hoping when we did that test, because the test that I did is not just sequential versus batch. We then went in and dialed in the individual air fuel ratios of each cylinder, because we had 802s, to find out if the lean and rich cylinders that we were adjusting actually changed the power. And it didn't really change the power very much. But if one of them is 14-1, even if it doesn't change the power when you make it 13-1 or 12-8 or whatever number you want on your NA motor, it will stop that motor from breaking, which is very even more important than making extra power. Durham, shirts are on the to-do list for March. Helge wants to know, is a Mother Thumper cam a good cam? It is, if that's the thing that you want it to do. If you want it to have that sound, those cams actually make reasonable power too, because they got a big split and a tight LSA, which helps the thing make power. But in my opinion, those, and I've talked to the guys at Comp about this, that those cams were actually just made to get the 3/4 race kind of sound that lots and lots and lots of people like. I'm like, you made cams so that so guys could have the like idle clip, and they're like, have you seen how many idle clips are out there on YouTube? I'm like, yeah, that's actually that's actually real. That's actually right. I should have noticed that. Kevin needs to find an A555 transaxle for my 84 Laser XE. Nice. 2.2 in the house. Which I went down a rabbit hole today. I spent some time looking at all the 2.2 and 2.5 stuff. And, I just get more and more excited about that, and left the guy a message about the one that I would like to get. And hopefully all that comes to pass. The other thing I looked at is found the bell housing that would allow me to mount a 2.2 on the engine dyno, because a lot of the testing that I want to do, doing it in the car because of accessibility and what it's going to take to swap intake manifolds and swap turbos and all that stuff. Because, they couldn't have put the turbo, like flip the motor around so the turbo's in front where God and nature intended it, so that we could do easy swaps. That would be really nice if the intake manifold is there, because we're not going to change the exhaust very much. It obviously also should have a crossflow head, because that would make life much easier. But if we had the accessibility to change the intake manifold and the turbo and all that stuff, that would be nice. But doing it on the engine dyno will make life a lot easier. So Durham, you have a 3.8 forged piston, Lanati rods, and the BTR 202 cam, and a huge van. Yeah, so you need lots of displacement on that thing. JR78, I did talk to Tom about the 292, and he did indicate that there was going to be that I would be able to feel the resonance or the frequency of that motor when we revved it. And I could do it, and I could feel it already. We could feel it in the stick, and we could feel it in the room. That and I don't know if that's meaning that it gets to an unhappy place, because obviously guys are running 6 cylinders a lot higher than that. But he did tell me that that was going to happen, and that I would be able to feel that. So I don't know if we can adjust that with a different dampener or different pistons or rods or that kind of thing, but we'll have to see. GT40 versus GT40P. If they're both iron heads, I would pick the GT40 only because I like being able to bolt on the header or exhaust manifold and not having to worry about the GT40P head. Kind of had problems with burning plug wires and stuff, so I like the GT40 head better. Building a 289 Ford with the 671 stainless steel valves, I would definitely put I would upgrade the valves. I'm hoping that you have good heads going on that and you're not using stock heads. Stuart wants a big bang on the mini engine, the unbreakable lump. Yes, the GT40 has better header options than the P head. The P head has no advantage over the regular GT40, and the GT40 is just like a regular head, so you can bolt on all of the headers and stuff. Rhiannon, do you think a 5-liter with Victor Junior heads and a cam, 286, 294, 542, 563, a 112, 400 horsepower? You're going to be getting close depending on what you did with other stuff. A torquer manifold is not ideal. A Victor Junior would be better. I did a test on all the manifolds, a Performer, an RPM, air gap, I think, the torquer, and the Victor Junior. And the Victor Junior made the most peak power. The RPM air gap is by far the best choice for that combination because it makes the most average power. It loses a little bit out at the top. I think 400 is going to be kind of tough for that unless you have compression. Yeah, UPS mech, just run the 292 through that. Just just rev through it. The Ozman, why doesn't lift create more horsepower compared to a cam with the same duration? Lift can add power. It just doesn't add it the way that duration does. When you step up duration, typically you should think about that as adding more RPM potential. So if you change the duration, you're really going to change where the motor wants to make peak power, as opposed to adding lift. Like if you add lift to a stock cam, you're not going to dramatically change where the thing makes peak power. It might make more, but the shape of the curve is going to be very similar. But if you had 20 degrees of duration, even if you kept the lift the same, it's definitely going to change where the thing makes power. Would a 235 solid lifter motor stay away from the resonance and RPM better? I don't think the resonance is a camshaft thing. I think that it's a I think that that's the bottom end and not the top end. Simple mods, what small rare cars? I really like BMW Isettas. I've said over and over again that I really like the Nash Metropolitans. I really like, and I was talking to my wife about this on date night, how much I like these little hatchbacks. I like the little hot hatches. I like the FX16. I like the Dodge Omni. I like the Sprint Turbo. I like the Volkswagen Rabbit stuff. I like all of those little hatchbacks. The Mazda 323 GTX is like really super cool. It's very, very expensive for what it is, because there's a lot of other options that do what that car does and do it better and make more power and stuff. But that's still really cool. Yeah, UPS, it's the bottom end of that 6-cylinder that's doing that, because we noticed that on other motors as well. Well, Rian, then if the torque was free, then it's priced right, and it's going to make the power that you want because it's free, right? ICT car guy. I don't think Lisa is the lucky one. I think that that's me. Joe, I've never run anything on nitromethane. I think that they have at West Tech, but I've never done it. Yeah, Kevin, I actually don't want a Turbo 3 engine. I know the guy has one for sale, but that's not, I mean, it's really cool and it obviously made good power, but I don't like the problems that they had with the heads. I think that they put iron inserts in the aluminum head, and then they did a recall on those and replaced those, I think, with aluminum is the story that I got. And maybe that fixes them, and that thing made good power, you know, obviously stock. But I want to do the Turbo 1 head, so either a Turbo 1 2.2 or a Turbo 1 2.5. Either one of those are great. I'd like to have the common block, but I want to do all of the stock stuff and start from there and show people what actually happens when you, here's what happens when we did a 2.5 or 3-inch exhaust. Here's what happened when we turned the boost up. Here's what happened when we swapped the intake manifold. Lots of guys from back then are saying that you only want to run this one specific cam. I think it was the biggest NA cam. This is the one that you want. I noticed that several of these cams are reverse pattern cams, which I don't think that I would run, or that I would at least want to try something else. We know that porting the head and putting more cam timing in it, like putting a 210 or 215 or 220 degree at 50 camshaft, is going to help power. They just do. And then putting the right runner length, I'm probably going to have to build my own intake manifold for those, but we want to try some of the factory ones. The air-to-air intercooler on the T2 motors is not going to be ideal. It helps, obviously, much better than having nothing, but I'm going to run an air-to-water, and we're going to get it really cold. We're running E85. Well, I just am really excited about doing all this cool stuff. One of the worst mess. I didn't make the worst mess at West Tech. I make a mess whenever I go because I am testing so many things. So it's just like cylinder heads and headers and intakes and stuff is everywhere. But when I blew up a couple of the big bang motors, there was oil everywhere. We caught one of the small blocks on fire when we were doing the Wheel of Death stuff. But Mahovitz, I think, saw the front half of his motor off because he broke a rod or something, and it just ended up like cutting its way through most of the motor. So that was pretty messy. Daniel just got a 1966 289, best initial bang for the buck. You're going to bore 20 aluminum heads. The best heads, I think that there are lots of cheap ones out there that you can get. Somebody was telling me about I can't remember. Chad's in the house. What's up? Chad, how much more power will a 400 make than a 396? It'll just make 4 more. Skip White, I think, is the guy I was talking about on the 289. But there's lots of good heads. If you want to get a brand name head, get an Airflow Research or a Trick Flow, those kinds of things, Brodex. There's lots of good heads for those. Look at the head video that I did, and you guys can see all this. Chad. Yes, Mahovitz does win because he makes lots and lots of power. And like when I break something, like we broke the Big Bang motor, we just broke like, you know, part of the pan. You could see kind of the rod sticking out of the pan or whatever. And you know, Chad, but we didn't cut the motor in half. I mean, we weren't that cool. Tyler, we're going to run some kind of NA motor when we put the turbo on it. I'm going to run the turbo through the blower first, and then we're going to put, let's see what. Yeah, I know, Chad. You say you didn't make the biggest mess? I'm just trying to be nice. We're going to run one of the NA intakes, either the plastic one or the other one that I'm looking at is the aluminum one from the F body. Doug, I haven't pushed past the 1,540 horsepower that we did at the stock bottom end on that 6-liter. Chad, hopefully you guys are warm out there, warming up over in Texas. Hopefully all that cold weather's behind you. And I hope the Sprint is still, or the Sprint. I wish I had a Sprint. The VX is still working good. I hope you have a turbo on it. And I also hope that you have an MSD on there to improve the mileage even more. If you're making the same NA power and torque with 2 engines of different displacements, will they make the same gains when boosted? Yes, but it would be really, really hard to make the same NA power and torque from 2 different displacements. The different displacements are almost by design going to make different power and certainly different torque somewhere in the RPM range. Yeah, Nitro, the L67 stock blower intake manifold is not good. It doesn't have any runner length at all, so it's not going to make any power, which could help us for doing a big bang because we want the power to happen at the top of the RPM range and get rid of all that pesky torque, which is exactly what that short runner intake would do. How much boost can a plastic intake make? I don't know. We've run 27 or 28 pounds with them, so 66 in Southern Ontario. Nice. No one can touch his turbo 351 Fox body on the street. Chad, you should be able to put either Chrome or Hondata on there. I'm hoping that I don't know if Hondata's going to have anything for the VX, but the Chrome guy should. And there's other programmable setups that you can use the factory ECU on. And hopefully, like I know that when we were doing the Chrome stuff, because Ernie was doing that, you might want to talk to Ernie also. He might know, so that you can run. I know that you're not ever going to run a ton of boost on that thing, but if you put a little, T25 or T22 or, even a T28, the big turbo on there, a disco potato or something, you could, you're only looking to make like 170 or 180 horsepower probably with that thing, but it would be super cool to put the MSD on there and have that work and get rid of it. You can feel the misfire when you're driving on it, because when you're trying to drive in lean burn, it's hard for something that's running at 19-to-1 to have complete ignition, have to have zero misfire when the thing's running. It's really difficult. Philip, camera recommendation of 393 for a Cobra kit car. Depends on 393. Put in Cobra kit cars before with 393s and 408s. They drive really, really nice. And they're, that car's already fast. It's just not going to make a lot of power on the big end if you want that. It's going to do better than an F cam. But if you want something to, really get going, something like the iCam, that 236, 248 cam is really good. Have you done any testing with the 305 and Vortec heads? Yes, we've run 305s. What's a good street distributor? We run MSD stuff, but you can run factory stuff as well. What ECM is best? Actually, there's lots of good ECMs. We run Holley HP or Dominator. I've not run Terminator, but I'm sure it does the same thing. Everybody wants me to do an EFI shootout, but actually, if it provides the right air fuel and provides the right timing, it's going to make the right power. And almost all the ECUs will do that. Maine is in the house. Could you please run out the door and come back? MDO 299. The OBD2 stuff is tunable because we ran OBD2 stuff with the Hondata, so we know that will work. I don't know about the Chrome stuff. His is that Civic is a 94. I know the odds, man. They got to pony up the donations because we had date night tonight, man. That was expensive. But at the very least, definitely hit the like button. Yeah, the Terminator stuff works really good. Matt over at Sloppy's been doing a lot of good stuff with the Terminators. That system works. I just haven't ever used it. It's so simple for me to just put on the same thing every time, and we know that it works. I've got lots of programs to choose from. I go, okay, it has about this injector in it, and it's a 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar, whatever it is, and we put that on there. And when we all up, I just push the button and it starts and runs. And from there, then it's just, it wants more fuel or it wants less fuel, and then we start playing with the timing, and all that's fairly easy. So because we have limited amount of dyno time available, and we're you want to do everything that you can while you have that dyno time available. So we want to make sure that we do as much testing on there as we can. So we want to get it to start up and run and get to tuning and get to parts changing. Kentucky's in the house. Say hi to my boy Brian Tooley out there. I know, Jason. What's up with that? Who's disliking? Yeah, Kentucky. A dual snorkel air cleaner. That's why I go to the wrecking yard, because you can find cool stuff like that. Venezuela, dude, you win. You're winning. Louisville's right up the road. He's in Bardstown. But Venezuela. Now, Venezuela has really cool stuff. You guys probably have like Venezuela. Do you guys have anacondas down there? Because I'm a snake guy, and I think that would be awesome. So if you have one and you find one, just make sure that you take a picture and send it to me. If you can only have one, an engine dyno or a chassis dyno, I prefer working on the engine dyno because the accessibility is much easier, and I don't have to lean over the hood to take stuff apart. Because we would never think about doing a piston swap or head swap or cam swap or any of these other things. I mean, we've done it on a chassis dyno, but it's a lot more work. Big snakes. New Zealand's in the house. Yeah, whoop whoop. Yeah, the Terminator is just a lower cost version of that, and it would do everything that I needed to do, because all I needed to do is be able to go like this and, okay, yes, more timing, yes, less timing, or yes, more fuel, yes, less fuel. All of the other stuff I don't even really use. Trinity, welcome to the channel. I'm going to be doing some 429 stuff. I have a I don't have one, but my friend Mark Sanchez has a 1970 429. He's a big T-Bird guy, and he loves these old T-Birds. And he got one of those motors, and it's all stock and ready to run. We're going to run that and then do some upgrades on that. You should see my 3.8 forged pistons. Nice. 6.3 rods. A 6300 rod. Are you doing a short stroke motor then? Are you doing a 4.8 deal? Tyler, don't even worry about it. Andrew, what's up, man? I get my rings at 0.238. That's really specific. When you start going into like the fourth and fifth digit, that's pretty specific. That's way more specific than I got when I did the Big Bang stuff. I just measured one, have the ring gap from the guys at Total Seal, and so I just sit and then just grind into the other ones, and they're at least 30. I knew, and they probably were more like 35, but we didn't care, because we're trying to break the motor anyway. So they all don't have to be exact. Andrew, is an XE270 too big for the Explorer? No, a 270 is fine. I think you'll like the smaller one, like the 264, better if it's a daily driver thing. But the 270 will make good power. Can I make 2,500 horsepower for 8,000? You're going to have trouble doing that. I mean, you have getting enough turbo to do that, not a problem at all. Getting all the rest of the stuff to handle that, that's a whole different thing. Foreign autos. And foreign auto, you're in Long County, I'll have to stop by and see you, but it depends on what you do. Chassis dyno is really good for a lot of stuff, guys that do, tuning or exhaust systems or those kinds of things. That works out really good. But for the things that I do where I have to change the whole top end of the motor or put camshafts in it, go through 10 or 20 or 30 camshafts, the engine dyno is the only way to do it. I wouldn't do that on the chassis dyno. I wouldn't do I built 4 motors and tested 30 sets of cylinder heads. You're not going to do that on a chassis dyno. Good people, good people. Yeah, they must be pressing that like button. Bore times 6,000. Yeah, we do 7 for really high boost stuff, but 6 is good. Yeah, Philip, the Canfield 192s, we've run those. They work good. An EFI Super Victor, that's going to lose power down low and gain power at the top. 10-to-1's a good compression. If you got enough camshaft in it, it should make good power. Joseph, how much power do you want? What turbo would you choose for a daily driver? Silverado has a 5.3. What about the transmission? That's what I would be worried about, not the power. A GT45 would work good for up to 700 horsepower. So if you want more than that, S475, 7875, or the Borg Warner guys, or the Garrett guys, I never give them any love, and I need to go look at their stuff. I just have never run much of their things. They're more expensive, and so I normally don't run those, but I can recommend those too. And the thing that I like about their stuff is they have really good compressor maps on all that stuff. So I'm going to do a video on compressor maps as well and show you why people don't pay much attention to compressor maps. No, Tyler, the trips to West Tech are not free, and I'm going down there again probably this weekend or so. Is 7,000 okay for a 302? It depends on what kind of drive or what kind of valve train and stuff that you have. But yeah, the rest of the stuff will go there. Yeah, Durham, it takes a while to gap the rings, which is why we like using that ring tool. And luckily they gave it to the guys at West Tech and I get to use it. So all we have to do is set it up and here we want to take 10,000s off here. And then the dial indicator says, okay, you've taken 10. And it's really, really close. And when we're doing stuff for the big bang motors, I don't care how close it is. It's close enough. I'll check out Project Blinky. Oh, Foreign, you're doing a 318 turbo motor and a 226 slant 6 turbo. Nice. I'm going to have a slant 6 in the back of my truck and that 347 that I'm bringing down with me. That's cool. I'll have to check it out. I'm going to put my email address in there. Send me over an email and I'll figure out where you guys are. Durham got them at 24, living on the edge. Not really. You're fine. Thomas, I'm going to give you some advice. When you make a statement, don't ever put "prove me wrong" kind of things. That doesn't work. The chassis dyno tells you something else, that the engine dyno tells you something, and then the chassis dyno tells you something, and then the drag strip and driving, they all tell you something, and all of it's beneficial. There isn't one thing that's better than all of the other things. Jeremy, I wish I had transmission recommendations. The 4L80E is kind of what people go to, or just a turbo 400 that's built up. If you want to not have the overdrive, I would recommend having the overdrive if you're going to drive it. But you're going to have a 4L60 is not going to last a long time with a boosted LS. Stuart, I'm in Northern California, and West Tech is in Southern California. Yeah, Durham, I agree. A little more gap is better than a little less gap. Have you ever maxed out a Whipple 2.9? I don't think I've ever put one on that's where we were trying to get the maximum amount. A 2.9 is not going to feed a lot, but you should be able to get into 4-digit stuff. Orlando, the symptoms of too big of a cam are poor drivability, poor idle, poor low speed power. Lulu, what's up? Oh, okay, cool. The Project Binky is has the drivetrain from the Celica All-Track, which is another really cool car. The guy at West Tech has one, and I like those. And again, they're really, really expensive for what they do, because an Eclipse or those all-wheel drive Diamond Star cars do everything that Toyota does. They just do it for a lot less money, and there's a lot more parts available for them. But for some reason, that All-Track is super cool. Texas in the house. Woodlands in the house. Joe, I have some 2V cams. They're pretty big though. Brandon wants to know cams for altitude. You should try to make as much power as you can. And I wouldn't pick cams differently for altitude unless I was building a dedicated drag race motor. Then I would put more camshaft in it than you would if you're running at sea level. But otherwise, I would cam it to try to maximize torque production in the RPM range that you want to run in. Yeah, Philip, as I recommended, you should go up from the 274 with that. The car weighs nothing. You have a 393. The 274 cam will drive around kind of almost like a stock one does. Put something a little bigger in that, like that XFI cam that I recommended, or 282, something bigger than the 274. Doug, what's my favorite older guy's mill? Well, I have two of them in the back of my truck. I have a 347 Pontiac, which I've never run, and then I have the Slant 6, which I haven't ever run either. If I put a 1200 horsepower on an engine dyno and then put it in a car with a turbo 350 built for 450 horsepower chassis on it, what's going to happen? It's probably going to end the life of that transmission. Yeah, simple mods. I like the Mitsubishi Starions. I had one of those for a while, and I think I ended up giving it away. I like those, especially the ones with the flares on them and stuff, and the intercoolers. I really like those. The 4-wheel drive Civics are very cool. The wagons. Rick Rack, I've not tested tunnel port heads. I know Jay Biddle had a set on his Trans Am car, but those are the only places. Those, and back when that Ford Power Parts was open, I remember seeing some there. Have you tested any of the L76 6-liter engines with the rec port heads? Curious how the narrow bore does with those rectangular port heads compared to an LS3. Take a look at all of the LY6 stuff, the 6-liter. And those heads work very well on a 6-liter. They make more power than any of the factory cathedral port heads do. Not more than a ported set of cathedral port heads do. They respond to all the same cam times. There's nothing special about that. There's nothing different about that rectangular port head being on a 6-liter as opposed to the 6.2 liter. They work very well. The Conquest, yes. Starion, yeah, in the house. Robert, you need to check the compression height on the piston because the rod length is going to be different than a 5-liter rod is. An Impulse turbo, yep. I had a Mirage turbo also. It's the same thing as a Colt. Yeah, I like the MGs and the Triumphs. The one that I really like is the Bug-Eyed Sprite with a rotary in it. That was always kind of a cool deal. Yeah, stroke 351 Windsor with the airflow reachers 205 heads, a 232, 240. That's like, I hope it's more than 500 lift. It needs to be more than 500 lift, 11 to 1, and it would run good. That's a good size motor. Yeah, Thomas, the making the power anymore, especially with turbo LS stuff and really all of the things, making the power is easy. But if you make 1,000 horsepower, you have to have 1,000 horsepower fuel system and 1,000 horsepower cooling system and 1,000 horsepower transmission and drive shaft and rear end and brakes and chassis and driving ability. And if you don't have any of those things, it can be problematic. Hell giant 302 Boss heads. I've run the Boss 302 heads. I've run the Boss 302 motor, and it worked very well. Take a look at, I have those videos up. I have the Boss 302 and the Boss 351. We built reproductions of both of those, and they work good. That's a good head. It flows 275 CFM, so it's better than any factory Windsor head by far. Okay, I got to get going, guys. Thank you for sharing date night. I'm glad you guys all came. I will see you guys all tomorrow. And everybody on Super Chats that helped me out, thank you very much. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Now I push